So as it says on the title page, this is not episode 3, this is an addendum to episode 2. Couple of things. Firstly, my apologies for the technical issues on these videos. I'm aware that the volume and the lighting and so on is a little bit variable. I'm working on it. I hope I will get better with practice. Secondly, and this is the main part of this, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Adam Smith. I referred to him very briefly in passing, but actually he's an incredibly important figure. His main work is a book called The Wealth of Nations, and this is the seminal work on which all of modern economic theory is based. And I thought it would be interesting to take a very brief look at his thinking and his ideas, but more importantly, because this is the Matrix, remember, to look at how some of his actually very sensible, very reasonable ideas have been perverted and subverted in our modern economy. Adam Smith was born in 1723, and his main work, The Wealth of Nations, was published in 1776. It took him about 10 years to write it. In that, he starts off by saying that people act out of a combination of benevolence and self-interest, but that self-interest is the more reliable gauge, and that therefore that is what should be used as the fabric by which to construct society. And so, you know, his thinking basically goes like that. People act primarily out of self-interest. People require goods and services that others provide, especially now as people have become more specialised. You know, production lines and targeted labour have meant that, you know, the need for each person to be self-sufficient is no longer there. People produce one thing and they use that one thing to exchange for all of the other things that they need. And that life requires the assistance and cooperation of, what's the phrase he used? The cooperation and assistance of great multitudes, and that they cannot be depended upon to provide their assistance, their goods, their services, purely out of benevolent motives. And so we therefore exchange with each other in the spirit of mutual self-interest. Smith believed that in a society of people completely free to do what they want and each acting out of their own enlightened self-interest, that a perfectly egalitarian society is created. And by egalitarian, he doesn't mean that everyone is exactly the same or has exactly the same, but that everyone is participating under the same conditions. You know what I mean? You have an absolutely level playing field. So yeah, his vision depended on conditions of absolute liberty, so minimal of interference, no interference from the state, that the state's role would be simply that of providing large infrastructure, a criminal justice system, and perhaps some national defence, but beyond that the government had very little role to play, and as such taxes would also be minimised. And he believed that the laws of supply and demand, if left entirely to themselves, would create a dynamic and stable and free and fair marketplace. But even Smith recognised that there were problems with this. Firstly, the idea of wages for labour. As far as he was concerned, the true wealth of any nation originates with its labour. It takes labour to dig gold out of the ground, you know what I mean? So the gold reserves of a nation should no longer be used as a measure of its wealth, but its ability to produce things with its labour should be the measurement of its wealth. And so the whole concept of wages for labour he did not approve of, because labour creates wealth, but wages give you no stake in the wealth that you are creating. You know, wages is a transitory thing. He also believed that the production line was just getting going when Smith was around, and he also believed that although the production line massively increased efficiency and productivity, but that it also destroyed human beings. You know, doing dull repetitive work year in, year out destroyed human beings, and that it should therefore be limited and automated as soon as was practicable. also recognised the fact that domestic labour done primarily by women was not factored in, that it was not given any monetary value, and that it made a huge contribution to the smooth functioning of society, and he recognised that as a shortcoming in his work. He also acknowledged that this would not on its own solve problems of inequality and poverty, and he recognised that there was also a significant danger of a completely unrestricted free market leading to unacceptably high concentrations of wealth in the hands of a very few individuals. Smith was fundamentally a good guy. He believed in empowering the workers and not letting the masters, the owners, run rampant over their workforce. He believed in benevolent acts in order to alleviate poverty. He sympathised deeply with the plight of the impoverished, and above all he recognised that huge wealth concentrated in the hands of a few people led to unfettered power, and they're based on the old axiom that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So in many ways Adam Smith was actually quite socialist in his views. He advocated a redistribution of wealth in society that should never become too concentrated in too few hands, that labour should be valued and that workers should be treated fairly and compensated generously, and he believed that the burden of running the mechanics of society, i.e. taxation, the burden of that should fall primarily on the rich. Above all, he was a libertarian and a humanitarian, and I think this sometimes gets lost in his in the derivation of his work into modern economics. Above all, he believed that the market needed to be tempered with human compassion and benevolent intent, and that one should never seek to get one over on the other, that exchanges should be of mutual benefit. I believe that he would be horrified if he could see what we have constructed, what we have created in his name in the modern economy. So when Adam Smith talked about enlightened self-interest, he meant exactly that, not naked self-interest, but self-interest which included an understanding of the fact that unless others around you were also prospering, that you had no chance of prospering. Somehow or other, that idea of enlightened self-interest has become twisted and corrupted into the idea of a dog-eat-dog, survival of the fittest, succeed or die, and that the poor are poor because they are lazy, stupid and worthless. And it's a good example of how a great man with good ideas, who had only the best interests of his fellow man at heart, how those ideas become co-opted and perverted to serve the needs of ruthless and greedy people. It's not unlike Nietzsche's ideas being co-opted and twisted to serve the needs of the Third Reich. And if that sounds like I'm dropping the Hitler bomb, that I'm being overly inflammatory and using highly emotive things as comparisons, well, I do this in full knowledge of what I'm doing, because the structural violence committed by our system of money and by our system of power and geopolitics and globalization far exceeds anything that was ever done by Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot combined. And it surely cannot be denied that wealth is far too concentrated in the hands of too few people. As I showed you in the last video, some 80% of the people on this planet are currently impoverished in some way or another. So, but even if you reject the whole thing that, about the origins of money coming from armies and controlling populations, even if you reject my whole premise on that, and even if you believe that money has a useful purpose to serve, I would contend that that useful purpose has run its course, that money now holds us back, that it is way too concentrated in way few hands, and we need to re-evaluate the way that we think about money. The fact is, we're facing new conditions now, conditions that we've never seen before. With our technological ability and our knowledge, we have the capability now to create abundance for everybody, instead of which we're creating profits for the very few, and this quest for profit is blocking us, because abundance is the enemy of profit. Scarcity makes things more valuable, makes them more desirable and therefore more valuable. For example, diamonds, when they find a very high number of diamonds in any particular year, they hold some of them back in order to keep them off the market so that it maintains the high prices of the diamonds. So the concept of abundance is entirely antithetical to a profit, debt, interest-based monetary system, and in the next video I'm going to go into the particulars of our monetary system and show at the next level how it blocks us from progressing as a society. But the point is that given that we are facing new conditions, in the light of new conditions we should be seeking new systems of organisation if our current ones no longer serve us. And I think it's pretty clear that our current model of finance does not serve us, not as a people. This idea of needing to exchange one thing for another in order to get what you want, if there is an abundance of everything for everyone, that need to exchange things is no longer valid. So what we need to do is allow technology, automation, the ability to communicate so easily and so readily with each other now. We need to let that come to the fore. I came across the idea of the technological singularity recently on a guy called Exerbia's channel. Well worth a watch, he's funny. And he was talking about the singularity, and the singularity he defines as being the point at which technology is developing so rapidly that it is impossible to see, even a few years down the road, where it's going to take us. And we're reaching that point now, where we can do almost anything. We have the capability to do almost anything. I mean, in terms of solving the problems of survival and living on this planet. If we were to unleash technology, take away the restraints that are currently placed on it, the need to make profit from it, the need to shield it from others so that they can't profit from it, to take all of that away and just unleash it, I really believe, and I know there are many out there that don't agree with this, I really believe that what we currently think of as human nature, the need to trade with each other in order to acquire things, and seeking, ideally mutual self-interest, but if necessary, profiting from and exploiting other people in order to get what we want. I really think it's time we started to think of those as archaic, outdated, irrelevant, unhelpful attitudes, and start to embrace the idea of there being plenty for everyone. We can do it. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were saying what we need to do is wipe 5 billion people off this planet. I think that's an incredibly cynical view. I mean, have we really come to hate our fellow human beings so much that we're happy to see 2/3, 3/4 of them wiped out just so that the rest of us can have an easier life? Somebody else said to me, where's the money going to come from to provide this abundance for everybody? Well, again, it's a simple rechanneling of resources. As I said in the last video, we don't need the money, we need the manpower, the skills, the knowledge, the resources. We need a different way of channeling those things. But even if we stick with the current idea of money that we have, all we need to do is divert the manpower, the resources, the research that goes into developing weapons of mass destruction, buying Trident, buying HS2, bailing out bankers, fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know what I mean? It was estimated that if the money spent, the money and resources wasted in the Second World War could have fed, clothed and housed all of the poor of the world 3 times over. So it's a simple question of redistribution of resources. Where do our priorities lie as a society? But it's clear from the fact that there is so much poverty and war and so on that our priorities as a society lie in profit. And there is nothing so profitable as scarcity, there's nothing so profitable as war, and these things are perpetuated as a direct consequence of a monetary system that ensures scarcity in the money supply itself, and which enslaves both individuals and governments in unpayable debt. And that is where we're going next video. It's a huge topic, and it's going to take me a while to put the video together. I'm also away for a couple of weeks in Spain, so it could be as long as 3 or 4 weeks before the next video goes up. Please be patient with me. I will do it. I'm not being slack. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Keep passing it on, and yeah, that's it.